Welcome to a space where silence turns into longing, where what you thought was ordinary suddenly becomes unforgettable. This isn't just another love story. It's a confession, a moment, a touch, a truth that lived in the quiet until it finally broke free. Here, we explore love that waits behind familiar glances, connection that hides in years of friendship, and the kind of surrender that doesn't feel like giving in, but finally coming home. If you've ever felt something too strong to name, if you've ever looked into someone's eyes and felt seen down to your bones, you're in the right place. These are stories of deep love, unspoken tension, undeniable chemistry, and moments that change everything in just one night. Subscribe now and step into stories that feel like secrets only your heart understands. He was always around, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that made him part of the background of my life, like the warm glow of a lamp you never notice until the room goes dark. He was just a friend's son, polite, soft-spoken, always offering to help carry groceries in or fix something loose in the yard. Younger, far younger, and yet steady in ways men, twice his age, had failed to be. I never really looked at him not like that, because the lines between us had always been clear. Until they weren't. It happened slowly, that shift. So quiet I didn't hear it coming. Maybe it was the way he lingered a little longer in conversations, or the way his eyes started holding mine just a second too long. At first, I thought I imagined it, that I was reading too deeply into a simple kindness, a boy's attentiveness to someone older, someone from his past, someone who should never look back at him and feel the way I had started to. But something in him had changed too. I don't know if it was his voice, deeper now, or the stillness in his gaze when he listened to me, really listened. Not the way people nod through your words while waiting for their turn to speak, but the kind of listening that makes you feel like your words matter, like you matter. That night, I wasn't expecting anything. It was late. I'd hosted a small dinner, friends, laughter, wine. He offered to stay and help clean up after the last person left, and I said yes because it felt natural to say yes to him. He washed, I dried. We moved around the kitchen like we had done it 100 times before, but this time the space between us wasn't empty. It was charged. There was a moment, I still remember it, clear as breath, when I reached to take the plate from his hand and our fingers touched. It was small, barely a second, but his eyes lifted to mine and didn't let go. I should have looked away. I didn't want to. There was something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in so long. Something curious and quiet, like he was trying to read a book I had closed long ago. That gaze didn't ask permission, and it didn't apologize either. It just held me there, and in that stillness, I felt something unravel. Some part of me I thought had gone numb began to stir. He stepped a little closer. Not enough to alarm me, just enough that I felt the warmth of him. I could smell his skin, that clean, worn scent that still held traces of the outdoors. My chest tightened. I backed up, bumping gently against the counter, and he paused. And that's when I saw it, the way his breath caught, the slight furrow of his brow, like he was waiting for me to run, or to stay. I stayed. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My heart was too loud in my ears, and my thoughts were spinning too fast to catch. But something in my eyes must have answered what his soul was asking, because he stepped forward again, slower this time, like he was walking through something sacred. His hand came up to my cheek, barely touched me, just hovered, trembling slightly before it settled. The feel of his thumb brushing my skin was so soft it hurt. No one had touched me like that in years, not out of obligation, not for comfort, not for lust, but like they saw me. And in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen reflected in so long, longing, not just for my body, but for all of me, my laugh, my sorrow, my silence, everything I had carried quietly, thinking no one would ever care to know. I don't remember who moved first. Maybe it was me. Maybe I leaned forward out of instinct. Or maybe he was always going to close the distance. But suddenly our lips met, not with heat, not yet, but with this hesitant ache, like two people trying to speak in a language they weren't sure they were allowed to use. That kiss broke me open. It was tender, cautious, but deep. The kind of kiss that doesn't ask for anything except to be felt fully, and I did. Every second of it, every breath we shared, every second our mouths explored each other's quiet, aching hunger. He didn't pull me closer right away. He let it build, let it stretch, and I melted into it, lost in the softness, the rightness of it all. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to think about what it meant, what rules it might break, what people might say. In that moment, none of it mattered, because for the first time in years, I felt awake, not just alive, but desired, seen, held without being touched. Everything inside me shifted that night. The years I had buried my longing, the times I convinced myself that kind of connection was behind me, all of it came rushing back like a wave I didn't know I needed to feel, and I let it crash into me. I let him in, into that quiet, guarded part of me I had forgotten even existed, and nothing was the same after that. It started with silence, the kind that wraps around two people who shouldn't be feeling what they're feeling, but do. The kind that breathes louder than words, that fills the air with questions no one dares ask. He was sitting across from me, nothing unusual in that. It wasn't our first evening alone, but something about that night was different. The way he looked at me, not like a boy seeing an older woman, but like a man discovering something sacred, something forbidden, something he couldn't unsee. The lights were low. Music played softly in the background, nothing dramatic, just enough to keep the quiet from feeling too heavy. We had both stopped pretending to care about the conversation on the television. Our glasses were nearly empty. I was leaning on one elbow, relaxed but aware of how close he was, aware of the way his voice had softened through the night, aware of how my body was beginning to betray me, sitting a little too still, breathing a little too slow, waiting. I think we both knew we were past the point of casual. The silence grew, not cold, not distant, but thick with everything unsaid. I could feel it, like the space between us was shrinking, even though we hadn't moved. And then, it happened. His hand, reaching to pass me something, brushed against mine. It should have meant nothing. A casual touch, accidental, but it didn't feel that way. It felt intentional, slow, deliberate, and when his fingers grazed mine, he didn't pull back. Neither did I. The world paused. I remember the way the heat of his skin moved through me like a wave. Not fire, not urgency, but warmth, so deep it reached places I had forgotten existed. That simple, small touch held more weight than any kiss I'd ever known, because in it, he didn't just touch me, he asked something. He asked if I would let him in, if I was still capable of being seen, of being felt, of being wanted, and in that frozen second, something inside me answered. I turned my hand over slowly, letting our palms meet. He watched my face the whole time, searching for a sign, not of permission, but of truth. My fingers folded around his, and when they did, I felt the tremble in his hand. He was nervous, not because he doubted me, but because what we were about to step into didn't come with a map. It wasn't planned, it wasn't safe, but it was real. His thumb moved across my palm, and I closed my eyes. It was such a small gesture, gentle, curious, reverent, like he wasn't exploring a hand, but the part of me that had stayed hidden for years. The part that had stopped believing someone would ever look at me like that again. With awe, with patience, with the quiet kind of hunger that doesn't rush or demand, only hopes. When I opened my eyes, he was still watching me. Not smiling, not speaking, just watching, like he didn't want to miss a single detail of who I was in that moment. I felt stripped bare, not in shame but in trust, and still neither of us said a word. Because words would have broken something fragile. Words would have made it about reason, and this wasn't about reason anymore. It was about the ache that lives behind the ribs. It was about the lonely places we carry that no one else sees. It was about two people who shouldn't have fit together, but somehow did. I don't know how long we sat there, fingers tangled, eyes locked, breathing slowly into the silence, but I remember what I felt. I remember how my chest softened for the first time in years, how I leaned just slightly forward and felt his body mirror mine, like he'd been waiting for me to close that last inch. There was no rush, no force, just stillness, and the knowing that something had changed forever. He brought my hand to his lips. He kissed it, soft, careful, almost unsure if he was allowed, but I didn't stop him. I couldn't. Because that kiss wasn't about seduction. It was about seeing me, about touching the woman underneath the quiet, underneath the walls, underneath all the years that had taught me to be strong instead of soft. And in that single tender moment, I felt myself returning, not the woman everyone knew. The one even I had forgotten was still there. He leaned closer. I felt his breath on my skin. Still, no words. But his eyes said everything. If you let me, I'll be gentle. I'll take my time. I'll treat you like you deserve to be treated, like you've always deserved. And in that breath, I let go of the weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. The pressure to be guarded, the fear of being wanted for the wrong reasons, the years of going untouched, not just physically, but emotionally. That silence, that long, aching, beautiful silence, had been waiting for this. For two souls to reach past all the reasons they shouldn't, and finally listen to the only thing that mattered, the truth inside the touch. There was no turning back after that, not because we did something dramatic, not because we crossed some forbidden line, but because in the simplest gesture, his hand brushing mine, we both said yes to something deeper, something real, something neither of us had expected, but both of us had needed. And I'll never forget how it felt to be seen like that. That night, the world outside didn't matter. The noise, the rules, the years that stood between us, all of it fell away the moment I let him in. The air was soft. Everything moved slower, like the house itself was holding its breath. He sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat from his skin, but not so close that it rushed anything. He never did. That was something I learned about him over time. He never asked for more than I was ready to give, and that night, I was ready to give him everything. We hadn't planned anything. We never spoke about feelings, not in that way. But they lived in our glances, in the space between our words. And when he looked at me that night, it was different. Not bolder, but deeper. Like he saw something in me no one had taken the time to see. I felt it when he touched my hand, not with hunger, but with reverence, like he knew the weight of what he was reaching for. My fingers curled into his instinctively, and he pulled me gently toward him, not to claim, but to hold. He asked nothing of me, but I gave him everything. I didn't do it because I felt pressure. I didn't do it because I was lonely or searching for validation. I did it because in that quiet space where our eyes met and our breaths slowed, I felt safe. Truly safe, and I hadn't felt that in years. He brushed my hair behind my ear, and I swear my heart cracked open. The warmth in his fingertips traveled across my skin like a memory I never had but somehow knew. He leaned in slowly, watching me for any sign of doubt. There was none. When his lips finally touched mine, it was soft, so soft it ached, like he wasn't just kissing me. He was asking me to trust again. And I did. The kiss deepened, not with urgency, but with surrender. His hands found my waist, my back, my neck, not grabbing, not taking, but learning. Every movement, every sigh was a conversation. My body spoke the words my heart had forgotten how to say, and he listened with everything in him. There was no fear in me that night, no shame, just release. I let him see me, all of me, every scar, every line, every part of me I had kept tucked away behind years of being needed, but never wanted. He didn't flinch, he didn't hesitate. His eyes never left mine, even when the moment deepened, even when we crossed the threshold from soft touches to the kind of closeness that blurs everything else. He kissed the curve of my shoulder like it was a promise. He ran his hands over my skin like he was learning a language, not trying to conquer. And in the hush of that room, I gave myself to him fully, not just my body, but the ache in my chest, the loneliness in my bones, the hope I had buried deep down and stopped believing would ever bloom again. He didn't take me, I offered myself. That night wasn't about sex. It wasn't about breaking rules or chasing fantasies. It was about two people meeting in the quiet middle of everything unspoken. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being vulnerable. I wanted him to see it all, the strength and the softness, the doubt and the desire. I wanted to be known, not admired, not used, just known, and he did. Every time his lips touched my skin, I felt something loosen inside me. Years of being unseen, years of being strong for everyone else, years of closing the door on the part of me that longed for connection, for intimacy that meant something. I let it go. I let him in. We moved together like we had always belonged in that rhythm. No rush, no pressure, just emotion, deep and slow and aching. It wasn't loud, it wasn't wild, but it was real, and that made it more powerful than anything else could have been. After we didn't speak, he pulled me close, wrapped my body in his arms, and I rested my head on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath my ear, like a song I never knew I'd been waiting to hear. I traced the outline of his hand with mine, memorizing the feel of him. Not because I feared it would end, but because I wanted to hold onto the stillness we had created. In that silence, wrapped in his warmth, I realized something. I wasn't just falling into someone new. I was returning to myself, to the part of me I had pushed away for so long, the part that craved not just touch, but tenderness, not just connection, but depth. That night wasn't the beginning of something wild. It was the beginning of something true. The morning after was quiet, but not the kind of quiet filled with doubt or questions. It was a calm that wrapped itself around me like a soft blanket, like the air itself was trying not to disturb what had finally come alive. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel panic. I felt warm, safe, whole. The first light filtered in through the curtain, gentle and gold, catching the curve of his shoulder as he lay next to me. His breathing was steady, slow. One of his hands still rested against my waist, like even in sleep. He wasn't ready to let go, and neither was I. I didn't move for a long time. I didn't want to, because everything inside me had shifted, and for once I didn't need to explain it to myself. There was no voice questioning what had happened, no guilt creeping in. Just a steady, quiet truth sitting in the middle of my chest. This wasn't a mistake. His presence didn't overwhelm the room, it filled it. With softness, with honesty, with the kind of closeness that didn't ask for permission or demand anything back. Just two people lying still, wrapped in something real. I watched him as he slept, not because I was in awe, but because I was in peace. He looked younger in that moment, his brow relaxed. The edges of his lips barely curled, like maybe, even in dreams, he knew what last night had been. It hadn't just been touch or passion. It had been something deeper, like our bodies spoke the language our mouths had been too afraid to voice for years. And now, here we were, no words, just skin against skin, breath meeting breath, stillness, not silence. And I didn't feel used. I didn't feel foolish. I felt seen. And not just for the parts of me that still held beauty or the woman he had kissed hours before. He saw me, the tiredness I'd hidden behind smiles for so long, the longing I had buried beneath roles and responsibilities, the woman who had learned to live without softness. He saw her, and last night he didn't fix her. He didn't save her, he just held her, and that was enough. I finally sat up, pulling the sheet with me, not out of shame but instinct. The room smelled like something I never wanted to forget, like skin and heat and something tender that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. I looked around and felt like I was in a place I'd been searching for, not a location but a feeling. He stirred barely. One arm reached for the space where I had been, fingers brushing the pillow. When his eyes opened, they found mine instantly. And in that gaze, nothing changed. No flicker of confusion, no hesitation. Just that steady, grounding warmth that told me everything was okay. We didn't rush toward each other. We didn't speak in hushed, awkward tones. We just sat in it, whatever it was. He sat up, ran a hand through his hair, then gently rested it on the small of my back. A touch so light, it could have gone unnoticed, but I felt it everywhere, because it wasn't a grab or a pull. It was presence, his way of saying, I'm still here, I'm not going anywhere. And in that moment, I realized something that broke me a little, but in the best way. I had gone so long without being truly touched. Not the kind of touch that seeks, or wants, or takes, but the kind that remembers, that honors, that listens. He had touched me that way, last night, this morning, and now I couldn't unfeel it. I didn't want to. We stayed like that, quiet, but not distant. Words weren't needed. There was something in the stillness that spoke louder than anything we could have said. Maybe because there was no fear, no pretending, just truth. When we finally stood and got dressed, there was no awkwardness, no panic to cover what had happened. He moved toward me as I buttoned my shirt, his fingers brushing mine, then resting over my hand. He didn't say, I love you. He didn't need to. That look, that hand, that closeness, it said everything. He kissed my forehead, slow and full, and I felt it all over again. The quiet certainty that this wasn't just something we stumbled into. This was something that had waited patiently between us, never rushing, just breathing silently beneath the surface, until the moment was finally right. And last night, it had finally breathed. We walked out into the kitchen where the light was stronger now. He poured coffee, handed me a mug, and we stood side by side like we'd done it 100 times. It didn't feel strange. It didn't feel sudden. It felt like home, because love like that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand or shake the ground beneath your feet. It waits in silence, in friendship, in small glances and quiet comfort. And when it's ready, when you're ready, it steps forward, not to take over your life, but to show you what was always possible beneath the surface. That morning, we didn't need labels. We didn't need promises we weren't ready to speak out loud. We just needed presence. We needed to feel, to be, to breathe in the truth that had finally found its voice. And in that stillness, I knew this wasn't a mistake. This was love that had waited in silence for its moment to finally breathe. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More is coming. More moments, more longing, more truth. Stay with us.